According to statistics, something like 40% of you students are so depressed on any given day that you're incapable of actually performing any useful work, of getting to your studies, passing your tests. And it's something like 1 in 10 of you have even thought about suicide in the last 6 months. Those are really depressing statistics and motivated me to make this little series of videos that I hope can help you understand a little bit about yourselves and also get some guidance on maybe some things to do so that you don't fall into one of those unfortunate statistics and that you end up in a place where you can be productive and happy. I'm Rob McLeod. You know me as the instructor in Fundamentals 2. I've decided to try and consolidate a lot of things I've been reading and hearing and learning about from experts and who are social psychologists, clinical psychologists, sometimes research psychologists, into the elements that give us our sense of happiness. And I hope that through these little videos, we can make some progress on understanding, first of all, what happiness is from a pretty scientific point of view. I will definitely lean on these folks and the literature they describe to hopefully help us understand that there is science behind a lot of the statements, a lot of these goals. Now, it'll be a mix of understanding certain things like why our brain lets us down. And there are many cases where our brain really can deceive us if we don't recognize what's going on, all the way through to what I hope are some suggestions for ways to improve our state of happiness and come to at least a better place. And I thought, rather than my office, which you'll see lots of in other videos, I'm going to do these videos in some of my happy places. And most of them are outdoors, not all of them, but I'll be moving around. I love to be outdoors. I love to be here in nature, like I am now with greenery around me. That's one of the beautiful things of living in a place like Utah, is we have access to this kind of nature, and we'd be crazy not to take advantage of it. And so yeah, I'll try and check in with you from these sorts of places. Now, the sources for this I've mentioned, I think, a little bit in the opening lecture we did on the first day of class, are at least two and probably more major figures in this space. One of them is Arthur Brooks, who we may even get a chance to see in person this year. He has a professional relationship with the University of Utah. He's a professor in Harvard School of Business and teaches a course on this very topic to Harvard Business School students. And the other one that I'll lean on probably even more is Dr. Laurie Santos. Now, as you may remember, Dr. Santos created a course at Yale in which she tried to understand the psychology of the good life. That's the name she gave to the course, and had an enormous response. 1/4 of the entire student body tried to attend her lecture and participate. And this was probably been 10 years ago, and the demand has not gone down. If anything, it's gotten probably a little worse with all the conditions from the pandemic, from the job situations you're all looking at, just from the social situations that we're living in. And so I'm going to call upon a lot of ideas from them to try and understand what's going on and come up with workable solutions. Now, of course, before we start any of this, we got to define what we mean by happiness. And there are many definitions out there. You can find all sorts of them. And you've seen, that I think our lives, when you come up with a metric of the satisfaction or the joy or the numerical score we want to give our lives, that ends up being the integral of those moments of happiness integrated over our life. And Arthur Brooks says things like happiness is a combination of enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. And we'll get into more of the details of that, but the point is it's complex. The point is we never get truly happy. We're just trying to continue to move through our lives toward a place of happierness and trying to find ways to make us happier. Now, Laurie Santos takes a little more psychological definition, more rigorous definition, and she talks about two different kinds of happiness. So there's happiness in our lives. So that's the happiness we feel when something good happens, when we're grateful for something, the joy we have when events turn our way or we accomplish something. And then there's happiness with our lives. So that's when we look at our lives, we look back, we look around, we see ourselves from a little distance. Are we happy with the way our lives are going? And I hope you can see there's some subtle differences there. We'll explore those differences as time goes on, but we're going to try and build on both those elements, because both of them deserve our attention. And there's some other, Arthur Brooks talks about the macronutrients, the ones he listed there. He also describes some pillars of happiness that he considers family, friends, faith, and work. And I like this, and I like it especially because each one of them are rich topics we can dive into. And I should, just to clarify from the start, and Arthur Brooks does this pretty well himself when he talks about it, that faith here doesn't mean the religious faith. It just means a recognition of our perspective. So I would sort of change that pillar to say that we need perspective. We need to see our lives in the bigger scheme of things, whatever that means. It's a very individual sort of framing of that idea. But we have to recognize that we really aren't the center of our universe. Sometimes we can be fooled into thinking that, but we're a lot happier when we recognize that we're part of something. We're part of a society, we're part of a world, part of a planet, and we have an important role to play, but we're not the center really of any of this, and that helps a lot. So we'll get to these other elements because they're considered really essential. Everybody agrees on that. And as we go forward, we'll revisit all these, dig into them, and as I said, try and understand where they're coming from, and then build up some resilience, build up some solutions, some strategies that hopefully will make us a little happier. Laurie Santos is very modest in what we can achieve in our ideas about happiness. She says that maybe we can get a 10 to 15% improvement in the happiness scores. Of course, there are psychometric tests to determine your happiness level. And she says, we can expect some, reasonable improvement in that score. The good news is, to put it in perspective, that the tests that many studies have been carried out on twins, fraternal on fraternal twins, to evaluate the question of how much of this happiness, as we measure it again on these scales, is genetic and how much is determined by other factors. And it looks from these studies like we're only about 30% dictated to, if you will, or heavily influenced by our genetics, which leaves a lot of room for other factors. One of those other factors that we often get a little maybe too busy with are our circumstances. We can convince ourselves that happiness only comes when we're in a good circumstances, when we have a happy life around us, we're in a happy family, all those sorts of things. And it turns out those sort of circumstances, which are only partially controllable at the best of times, they don't seem to have as big a role as one would think. I haven't found quantitative indices, but a recurring notion that one can come out of really bad circumstances and still find a path to happiness. So that really leaves that third component that we can improve on. That's the part that determines how life's events actually influence us, how they get to us, how they affect our emotions. And that's the part that obviously we can work on. And so that's what we're going to come back to, hopefully in a regular series of these. And I hope you find them useful and enjoyable. And so take care until next time.